Hello, welcome to Lessons of Vietnam. My name is Bill Dixon. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Bob Matthews. Today is September 24th, 2014. And we did have a guest tonight, but because of weather and health situations, he had to cancel out the last minute. So we kind of put together a bits and pieces show for you tonight. Hope you learned some things and have a good time too. Bob just got back from up in the Yankee land, Pennsylvania, and I think he wanted to see. I think he wanted to see his football team and his baseball team. But he got to. He did. You won both. Your team won both games. I
Yes,
guess.
they did. The Pirates are in the playoffs, and the Steelers are looking good.
Well, they whooped up on our Panthers.
Yes, they did. Talk is dangerous.
Well, when I got it noticed today that our guest late this afternoon, when our guest was not going to be with us, I started going down what kind of show we're going to have, and so I kind of put together a few things. And you know, on the wall, Bob, we said on the wall it has the wall starts in 1959 and ends in 1975, and I always wondered just what happened and why 1959 date was used. There's so many different beginnings of Vietnam. So I did some research today, and in January 1959, the Vietnam War began when the North Vietnamese decided to go into a, rather than political against South Vietnam, they were going into an armed aggression against South Vietnam. And that's kind of when the official war started. In 1959, in April, Eisenhower made a statement that we were to he made his first commitment to make sure that South Vietnam stayed an independent state. And as they say, the rest of it's history.
Sure.
And today I was also looking around, and I came across a quiz. And I'm going to see how good you are on Vietnam.
Me?
I only got, out of 10 questions, I only got 5 of them right.
Ooh, well,
and
that's not bad for a Wilson boy.
Well, that's true. That's true. The first question is, the first major operation involving U.S. forces in Vietnam took place in, and the answers are 1954, 1960, 1963, and 1965. What's the answer?
1954.
That is correct.
After
the French defeated, you're already on a roll here. After the French defeated at the hands of the Communist Viet Minh in 1954, U.S. policymakers decided to take the lead, and they had Operation Passage to Freedom, where they took the people who wanted to be non-communist from North Vietnam down to South Vietnam through Operation Freedom. So you got the first question right first time. By the way, our number is 919-518-9773. Call in and ask Bob questions. Obviously, he knows a whole lot more about Vietnam than I do because I missed that one too.
Well, let me throw a little caveat in there, okay?
Okay.
A little caveat about
early. You're older than I am.
Yeah, about early Vietnam, because as you mentioned before, more and more people ask the question when they go to the wall, and that's what it was there for, to ask questions. I'm not being critical, I'm being complimentary. Ask questions, please, more and more about it, because history comes alive when you get your answers. Then you obviously tell other people the answer, because they're probably asking the same question, the circles you run in. So when 1959 is on the wall, and you go back with your information tonight, 54, and then as we know now, all of us do know this, with our show called Lessons of Vietnam, one of our goals in the next couple of years is to enhance this celebration of the Vietnam War and what it meant to this country, good and bad, but to enhance history and tell everybody the truth about Vietnam, about everything about it. And so the question sometimes, you'll scratch your head. Don't be afraid as a teacher or an instructor to say, I don't know yet. And go home and do your research and go back and give that group the correct information, and you building blocks toward knowledge.
You know, after this 50 years, I'm still amazed at the lack of knowledge of the Vietnam War and the Vietnam era, especially things about the people, the men and women who fought in Vietnam. So the myths still out there and still persist. They just can't seem to get rid of all of them.
I don't get it.
The next question is, the first used in Vietnam, dust off is a piece of slang meaning, and the answers are wipe out the enemy with napalm, an arrow Defoliation.
Defoliation.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
There you go.
Medical evacuation by helicopter and patrol with no enemy contact.
Any Vietnam vet knows a dust-off is a medical evac.
Even the wannabes probably could get that one. That was
There
an
you
easy
go.
one.
Medical evac.
That was a gimme.
The dust-off.
Okay, the next question is, true or false? American B-52 bombers were shot down by North Vietnamese MiGs.
False. Never. Sam missiles, maybe?
SAM missiles, the answer is false, and it was shot down by thousands of surface-to-air missiles, SAM missiles. Never were shot down by MiGs. I believe we did have some fighter planes shot down or some escorts shot down by MiGs. Won't many, because they didn't have many, and they didn't want to lose what little they had, and they wouldn't go out of Vietnam.
Let's say Chinese markings on them.
Okay, the next question. On January 31st, 1968, during the Communist Tet Offensive, Viet Cong commandos captured and briefly held the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. True or false?
False.
You are correct. I was there, and I remember how the news was saying the embassy had been overrun and was taken and so forth. They blew a hole in the fence, and they got inside the fence, but they never got into the building at all.
And the ones that got in died on the ground.
I think there was, when it was all over, there was one or two of them that were wounded and still alive, but the rest of them were killed in the process.
Yes, they were. They never. Let's make that very clear, because like you said about Vietnam, a lot of myths and a lot of history books tend to go with the myth because they're kind of more controversial. The embassy was never taken by the Vietnamese, never.
And the Tet Offensive, we won the war altogether, but we were definitely winning the war up until Tet, and with the news media making comments like the embassy was taken over and other distortions of the truth is what turned the American public against the war and the American soldiers so much, was the Tet Offensive, even though we wiped out the Viet Cong as a fighting unit at that time, which I somewhat I wonder if that wasn't the plan of the North Vietnamese communists to start with, because most of the NVA were religion. They wanted to stay Vietnam as a country, but not communist. They were nationalists instead of. But that was the turning point right there of the war. Even though we severely hurt them during the Tet Offensive.
Well, Bill, once the media then, and most of our listeners will recall, and even today, we tend to believe well-documented news stories. Nice music, nice clothes, nice background. And then the media was only 3 channels, and when they came on, Walter Cronkite especially, when he said, I feel we have lost the war with Tet, and with the ability for the Viet Cong to pull off Tet, even though they lost, the ability to pull off the offensive looked like we fell asleep with the switch. The more you did your research, the more you looked back, you found out that couldn't be farther from the truth. Walter Cronkite, and I liked him a lot myself, had some very poor information, but he was believed. He may have been the most believed man in America.
He was, from what I understand, when I was growing up back in those times, that he was the most trusted man in America. Unfortunately, he was not always right.
Correct.
That's kind of when the talking heads came in. I think long about the Vietnam War, they went from to reporting news to making news for sponsors and so forth. Because then they started going with ratings, and they had to sensationalize everything to get higher ratings.
And catchphrases, slogans come in, teleprompters came in, and Walter Cronkite would sign off with his famous phrase, "And that's the way it is." And most of America said, yes, it is.
Yeah, if that's what Walter says, that's the way it is.
Exactly.
Okay, next question is, from January 1st to April 8th, 1968, U.S. Marines ended a grueling siege atop the exposed combat base at Khe Sanh. What was the approximate ratio of losses, Communists versus U.S., during the battle? And the answers are 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 30 to 1, or 60 to 1.
I'm going to say 60 to 1.
I got that one right, and you got that one wrong. It was 30 to 1. During the battle, over 70,000 tons of explosives were dropped on the NVA. They had excess of 15,000 NVA killed. Now, if you go to Khe Sanh today and you read the plaques and so forth that the communists have put up, it's the other way around, and they really, according to the communists, and I know what happened because it's written in the book. That's what one of the guys there, the carekeeper, said. He knew it was true because it was written in the book. He showed me the book.
He did.
Where that how Khe Sanh was, the Americans lost at Khe Sanh.
And if I can recall, Bill, didn't that same plaque mention something about ships were sank?
Oh, yeah, they sank about 87 ships, I think, at Khe Sanh.
How much water is in Khe Sanh?
Unless it rains, there's not much of anything.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
The imaginary ship.
Yeah, they were imaginary.
As we said before, those that write history usually control what people read.
Yeah. Now, this next question is a tough one. I didn't even have a clue on this one. In May of 1969, units of the 101st Airborne took on NVA forces. That's North Vietnamese Army, not the Viet Cong, but the North Vietnamese Army. Those are the guys. NVA were the guys who wore helmets and had basically the same equipment that the American soldiers did. NVA forces dug in along the high ground in Drang Valley. Savage combat, often hand-to-hand combat, quickly earned the battle with Grizzly nickname of Hell's High Acre, Hamburger Hill, Heartbreak Ridge, famous Heartbreak Ridge, and I think Clint Eastwood was in that battle.
He was.
Okay, and the Meat Grinder.
I'm going to say Hell's High Acre.
You got that one right. The task of taking Hill 937 took 10 attempts in as many days, and a month later, just like at Hamburger Hill, it was turned back over for the enemy.
Gone.
And
a strategy that many people question when we teach Vietnam, when they start to get critical thinking, and they say, why? Why didn't you conquer? We did. Why didn't you occupy? We didn't. And there's no answer to that. You conquer an area, you pacify it, you fortify it, then you leave it. Doesn't make any sense?
Well, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but visiting in Texas with Colonel Plummer.
Yes, the famous Colonel Plummer.
The famous colonel down in Texas. He brought out something very, very enlightening. The first time that Westmoreland, he was on Westmoreland's staff, the first time Westmoreland put in a base someplace, it'd be attacked, and they'd send out a group of soldiers, and they'd stay there.
Right.
And then they go over here and stay there. And he said, well, there's no way we can be in all these different places.
Sure.
So you had to go out and search for the enemy, but if you had all these bases out there, individual bases, he basically said that was when we lost the war.
Yeah.
But it's still frustrating. It's like at the famous Hamburger Hill. We lost so many men taking the hill and turned back around and giving it back to the Viet Cong the next day or a few days later. It was very frustrating, but at the same time, you cannot, every time you have a battle, you can't put a group of soldiers there as an encampment or a base. It just wasn't possible.
And you can't make the analogy like the Old West. You can't build a fort and then build a town around it, because when you start to study Vietnam, you can't escape the geography, the smallness of Vietnam, the narrowness of Vietnam, and the amount of men we had there for only a 1-year tour of duty. You were limited by many, many things: time, weather, policy, and then when you come up with a search and destroy, you were handcuffed. You almost handcuffed yourself. So some of the historians, I think they know everything, and they start to look back and say, well, wait a minute. Maybe Westy was right. Maybe he was not. But he certainly tried everything he could. But as Bill just said, you could not build a fort in Vietnam, occupy it, and stay there, because your tour of duty was 1 year. Replacements coming every single day.
Well, Bob, that kind of goes to the story. We didn't have 10 years experience in Vietnam. We had 1 year's experience 10 times in
Exactly
Vietnam.
Right.
And well, also one of the problems was you had a lieutenant or whatever in the field for 6 months, then he was rotated back to a field.
Sure.
Just about the time he knew what he was doing, they rotated him back to a base camp or someplace to take over a desk job or whatever. And the sergeants had just trained him to be a good lieutenant by then, and they pulled him out to go back and man a desk, and brought in a new lieutenant, which somebody had to retrain.
Sure.
All over again. So.
Well, Bill, I think one of the things that people come up when you start really analyzing Vietnam, with some hindsight, is most people that look at it say one of the major things and why a lot of the vets felt bad when they came back is they thought we left too early. I mean, the tour of duty was long enough. I mean, we did it. We both did it. We counted every day till we got home. But looking back on it 45 years later, it would have made more sense to spend 3 years there and get the job done correctly. And a lot of men and women to this day that served in Vietnam still have that guilt that we left them hanging. That's why I was so interested tonight to talk to our guest. I'm sorry he couldn't make it tonight, but Colonel Hein Vo was there and fought beside us in Vietnam. And I do think a lot of the Vietnamese have forgiven us for what we did 10 years, but we didn't stay. I don't know if we've forgiven ourselves.
Well, I don't think there's ever a question that forgiveness for the American soldier. The people who come here, the boat people and refugees who've come here, they have become American citizens and pretty strong American citizens.
Oh, yes.
So forth. And basically this country walked off and left them. Not the soldier, but the company and the politicians walked off and left them, which is a shame, but we basically sold out their country and walked off. Congress really did a number on the South Vietnamese people and the American soldier.
Well, one thing I'd like to give the audience, because we said tonight we're doing bits and pieces, and the Vietnamese population in our country now is close to 2 million. 1.95 million people in this country. Most are in California and Texas, but North Carolina has a population of over 7,000. A lot in the Greensboro area, a lot in the Wake County area. And the most adopted international children are Vietnamese babies. They have a very strong influence in this country, and they have very strong work ethic, which we're very proud of.
You said 7,000. I think we got a whole lot. I think it's about 17,000 just in the Triangle area here.
That could be.
So forth. But, Bob, you're talking about staying for 3 years. The problem you had with that is in World War II, the average combat soldier saw about 260 days of combat or less. It was actually less than that.
Yes, it was.
I think it was like 200 and some days of combat. But the Vietnam soldier who was in combat, because of the helicopter, saw up to about 360 days of combat. And you spread that over 3 years, they would have had to kind of pull them back out of the field like they did in World War II.
They were worn out.
There was no way they could have stayed out much more, because the guys I went out with sometimes had not seen a bed or a bunk in 6 months. They were eating basically sea rations. You got a bath once a week if you were lucky. Your uniform basically rotted off of you, and the human body and spirit could not have done as many days extended out, because the combat days were already exceeding what had then been done before. But the physical wear and tear of the heat and humidity and animals and the bugs and the snakes and so forth were just so bad that they couldn't have. I don't think they could have gone on 3 years like we did in other wars.
I think you're probably right. There's been so many lessons from Vietnam. Our course, of course, is called Lessons Vietnam. But one of the major lessons we've talked about before is we as a nation and as a fighting force and as a people have learned so much because of Vietnam. And one is how to transition our troops home. When they do come home, how to give them proper counseling, proper use of the GI Bill, proper use of how to buy a home, proper medical facilities. Give them a leg up when they become a civilian. It's something the Vietnam soldier didn't have unless they did themselves and looked for it and found it. I mean, it was there. It just wasn't made available to all the soldiers. But it was there.
Well, Bob, one of the things difference between today and World War II and Vietnam and compared to today, World War II, most soldiers came home on a ship, and they had some time to decompress, get with other veterans and so forth. As we have said before, in Vietnam, you could actually be in the jungle today fighting, and tomorrow asking mother to pass the blankety-blank potatoes and not realizing what you just said, because you filled in the blanks very well there. And today they bring them back. It's basically a flight, just a quick flight back. But when they do come back, they do have some orientation and so forth before they're marched out for the family to see. So they do have that little bit of decompression time even today. We just kind of, and when we came back, you couldn't tell people you were a Vietnam vet. You almost had to hide it. And today, they welcome the soldiers going back. If you're a soldier coming in today, you'll probably get a standing ovation. You would have got a standing ovation when you came back from Vietnam, but it wasn't the kind of standing ovation you would want. But it was probably somebody's human waste thrown at you and baby killer and that sort of stuff.
You know, we learned so much. And I think the thing that maybe bothered me the most, as we talk about this looking back with nostalgia, is that I'm from a small town. And you knew everybody. Everybody knew you. And that's good and bad. But when you went to Vietnam, you almost, in fact, you did. You went alone, you served, and you made fast friends. You came home alone, and you went on alone. You didn't have that tightness that groups have today. When they train together, they serve together, they deploy together, they come home together. They're friends for life. We didn't have that. We've made up for it.
Well, there was one company that went through basic together, went through AIT together, and went to Vietnam together. That was the only. It was Charlie Company of the, I think it was the 9th Infantry Battalion that one company trained together, sit through basic AIT. They were all knew they were going to Vietnam from day one, and they went over as a group and came back as a group. That's the only ones who went over.
Very rare.
I remember how lonely and frightened I was to get on that airplane with all those other people who I knew nothing whatsoever about. Didn't have a friend on the airplane, and then you land in Vietnam and you have no friends there, and you don't have time to make friends. It's kind of it's really a lonely experience to be around a whole bunch of other people and don't know really where you are, what you're doing, or have anybody you can talk to.
Well, as we conduct these seminars and workshops down the road, you start to think back instantly. And, you know, this question you come up with the other day is, you remember distinctly getting on that airplane, looking right and left, back and forth, and you knew no one. And then when you came to Vietnam, you landed, it was so quiet, you thought you were in the twilight zone. You were afraid to say a word. And you got off the plane, and you looked to your left, and you saw all these guys going the other way. They were going home, you were going in. And still no one spoke. And you're like this, did I do something wrong? They said, no, just shut up, don't say anything, it's okay.
Well, some of the people who came in, unfortunately, had a hard time landing because they used to like to drop mortars on the runways to kind of welcome you to their country.
Oh, yes.
And then when you did get on the ground, you may very well see a plane load of body bags leaving. And when you get there, nobody tells you where to go. If you get under attack, where do you go? Here's a weapon or nothing. You know you're in a war zone. But nobody tells you what to do, where to go, no weapons, where's the bunker that you go hide in if you get rocketed. They don't seem to tell you that kind of stuff.
Never ask a question.
No. All right, next question is, okay.
Excuse me.
When do U.S. forces reach their peak of strength in Vietnam? The answers are August of 1967, December of 1968, April of 1969, or October of 1970.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say 69.
April of 69 was the highest number of troops. It was 543,482. Now, I don't know who counted those to get down to 82, but they were there because of the Tet Offensive, bringing them back up. I know when I got to Long Binh, it was 55,000 troops there in 67, and when I left after Tet in 68, they were bringing in more people because of the aftermath of the Tet Offensive. So that one was the number is 543,482. I can't imagine how they got that exact. Okay, next question is 15 members of the U.S. Navy awarded the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Which naval service professional received the most of this decoration? Aviation pilots and crew. Medical Corps, Chaplain Corps, Special Warfare such as SEALs, or none of the above?
This was a tough one for me. I'm going to say chaplains.
No. Medical Corps. Of the 15 Navy Medals of Honor awarded in Vietnam, the most 4 went to Navy corpsmen serving the traditional role as frontline medical personnel with U.S. Marines. In other words, if you were in the Medical Corps and you were in the Navy, you were suddenly become a Marine. The next one was the let's see, U.S. Marine Corps aviators, including helicopter pilots and SEAL team members and riverboat crewmen, each receiving 3 Medal of Honors.
Okay.
The remaining 2 Medal of Honors went to chaplain and a CB.
The chaplains.
And the chaplain, I think, recently got that Medal of Honor.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. It was on all the news. Well, we know the guys in the medevac chopper, like you mentioned, the Slicks. They were angels.
Yes.
They were angels from heaven.
All right, I got another tough question for you here.
Okay, I'm ready.
The first major clash between U.S. Army and North Vietnamese regulars took place in our Drang Valley in November of 1965. What innovations made this battle a dress rehearsal for what lay ahead? And here are the answers. Large forces conveyed directly to the battlefield by helicopters. First major action by American units armed with fully automatic rifles. Effective use of B-52s in tactical ground support role. All of the above.
Choppers.
All of the above. All the stuff. The B-52s, bombing, they were first issued the M16. If you remember, Sergeant Major Plumley would not use an M16 because he said it looked like a Mattel toy.
I remember that,
He still carried his 45, and it was in the movie, but that was the way he said it in real life, too.
I missed 2. I can't miss 2.
Well, you did. Unfortunately, that's true. Only missed 2.
Okay.
But M16 was the first time it was carried in the Bible. Now, let's talk about, they say that's the first major battle of Vietnam. Now, the first major thing was the one while ago, Operation Freedom, where they were bringing refugees from North Vietnam to South Vietnam. Right. But I have talked to some of the guys who were involved in a battle in November 8th, called the Battle of the Hump. If you've ever heard the song by Big and Rich, the 8th of November, that Chris Christopherson actually does the promo for that, talking to start with. The 173rd Airborne was attacked. In fact, to bring it closer to home, the medic on that in that battle was a man by the name of Lawrence Joel.
Yes.
Lawrence Joel was the first African American to win the Medal of Honor as a result of that battle since the Spanish-American War. And Lawrence Joel grew up in Winston-Salem.
Yes, he did.
You have Joel Coliseum, which is one of the big coliseums where the basketball games and so forth are played. You've got Lawrence Joel hospitals and dispensaries all across the country, named after Lawrence Joel. They lost 43 men that day. Nothing like what they lost at our Drang Valley, but that was a one-day battle, and that was November 8th, 1965. The Battle of our Drang Valley, that was made famous by the movie We Were Soldiers First and Young, was November 14th and 15th in our Drang Valley. And what they don't really tell you about in the movie was the day afterwards. They brought in groups to soldiers, American soldiers, to replace Hal Moore's group.
Right.
The 7th Cav, the famous 7th Cav. He kept thinking about Custer during the battle.
Yes, he did.
They brought in those guys, replace them, and when they got ready to take them out, they decided they didn't want to bring helicopters in because they didn't want to look like they were retreating.
Right.
So they marched them out. The problem was they were strung out so far and so wide that they were completely ambushed, and it was little groups of 4 or 5 American soldiers fighting their own battles that were separated so much. All the non-commissioned officers and officers were called up to the front of the column to meet with whoever the general was marching them out. And so they lost a lot of soldiers as a result of that, not trying to...
they certainly did.
But the guys of November 8th have always been a little testy when you say that the first major battle was our Drang Valley, because they were invited. And if you're in the battle, whatever battle you're in was a major battle.
You're exactly right.
If it's only two guys there involved.
Exactly.
Also in 1966 of September, it's the first time the United States announced they were actually using defoliant to destroy the communist cover. And I believe I read somewhere in history that Operation Ranch Hand started at least in '65, where they were spraying Agent Orange, Agent Blue,
Agent White.
Yeah, Agent White. It's the color of the barrel that was what they called the agent. It was all defoliant, but in order to know what it was Agent Orange, Agent Blue, Agent White, and that's when they started to spraying it. And you and I have talked about that quite a few times. Admiral Zumwalt
Yes.
Was the man in charge at the time, and you had river patrol boats going up and down the river, and they were getting shot at so much because of the dense jungle coming right up to the waterline, and they were getting shot at. American soldiers on the rivers were getting shot at because some of the rivers were narrow for running up and down. That once they did start using the defoliant, they found concrete bunkers right at the edge of the river that they couldn't see because of that. And Zumwalt ordered Agent Orange, and he paid a price for it.
Well, the thing about it, Bill, and as you well know, that I became very good friends with Elmo Zumwalt, and rest his soul, he's passed away several years now. And his daughter, Mazetta Zumwalt, Weathers, lives in Cary, North Carolina right now. And we had the opportunity to go to Texas Tech and to speak on lessons of Vietnam, and he was the main speaker. Admiral Zumwalt, commander of the Navy. And when he ordered Agent Orange, his son, Elmo Jr., was a riverboat captain who was sprayed with Agent Orange. He eventually developed lymphoma. It cost him his life. He died at Rex Hospital in Raleigh. And Admiral Zumwalt was asked that question. And boy, that reporter was brave that day to ask that question. Admiral, do you think you made the right move in ordering Agent Orange to defoliate the riverbanks, although it cost the life of your son? If a stare could have been more steely gray that day, I don't know if I've ever seen one. Admiral Zumwalt had eyebrows like hedges. He looked at that reporter, and he simply said, "Yes, and I'd do it again." You could have heard a pin drop for a mile in that room. A very ugly part of history, but necessary.
Well, probably at the time, he made the decision that to spray it, and it cost him dearly. But you look back now at the problems that we're having today as a result of Agent Orange. There's a lot of families are paying price. It seems to have jumped some generations and coming back out now with children and not children of Vietnam vets sometimes, but sometimes children. But it's actually skipping some of the children and coming out in the grandchildren and great grandchildren, and it's still having problems in Vietnam. I went to see a former Vietnam ARVN soldier this weekend who's dying from cancer. And he spent 9 years. He spent 9 years in a re-education camp after Saigon fell. And I discussed with his family about Agent Orange, and they felt like that Agent Orange also affected him. In fact, if you had boots on the ground, even if you didn't have boots on the ground now, some of the Blue War Navy guys are doing it. If you were automatically, if you come down with certain diseases and you were in Vietnam, that you are automatically considered to have Agent Orange problems. Sugar diabetes was one, and several cancers and so forth automatically put you in with the Agent Orange. And a long time, the Blue Water Navy guys had to fight for it because a lot of the airplanes that sprayed it came off aircraft carriers and so forth, and they had to handle the drums. And I heard of people taking those drums and cutting them in two and making a barbecue pit out of them to cook on some of the base camps.
You only cook away bacteria. Yeah. But we want to give you some advice tonight. All Vietnam veterans listening, if you are in Vietnam, as Bill mentioned, during the time of probably 65 to 75, and you've never been tested for Agent Orange, go to your doctor, go to the VA hospital, go somewhere, have a simple blood, a simple urine test, and you'll be told if you have any side effects of Agent Orange. It might mean nothing, and I hope it isn't. But most of our guys have been tested, and most of them come up clean. We have several members that have some aspects of Agent Orange. But it's a nationwide referendum now for every Vietnam vet to be tested. and have your bloodstream and your urine tested for Agent Orange.
Well, Bob, that's a good segue into something else. The month of November, we're going to be doing both shows in the month of November dedicated to Agent Orange and Agent Orange benefits and so forth. We're working with a national organization to put on a show. We'll be talking with some Agent Orange experts. You'll be able to call in to the show, or you can go on the computer and ask questions. We'll have people standing by. We'll give you numbers at the time. You can call people who can help you talk to the right people if you feel like you've got, or a family member's got problems with Agent Orange. That will be, let's see if I can give you the dates right off the top of my head, which is always hard anytime I do something off the top of my head. But I'd say November 12th is the first show, and November 26th will be the second show. And like I said, you'll be able to call in, get questions answered, get information on Agent Orange. It seems to be quite a bit in the public knowledge now. Monsanto and a couple of other companies are still being sued and fighting, and Agent Orange, basically, if you're using some of the defoliants we have today, you're basically using Agent Orange to kill weed killers and stuff they have today.
Like Roundup.
Roundup, well, yes.
One thing I want to mention, what Bill mentioned too, is don't be ashamed to call in for information. Don't be afraid to be ignorant, because a lot of people would not ask questions years ago. I don't have Agent Orange, I'm fine. Don't be a macho. Listen to these seminar shows. Call in. Could be an uncle, could be a nephew, could be a brother-in-law. Find out, have them tested, and rest assured, if they have Agent Orange, with the doctors now and the facilities, they can be helped.
Yeah, but you have to realize it's not just for you; it's for your children, your grandchildren, and some for your great grandchildren. It's things are just kind of coming out. It's taking years for some of it to come out. So
way too long.
Just listen to the show, take part in the show, call in, and be part of the show. Get the information, and then so you can make a right decision. Or an informed decision. I'm not certain you still make a right decision. The only right decision is the one you make, and then you go out and make it right, but it's an informed decision anyway. All right, we got one more question here, Bob.
Okay.
On January 26, 1970, Lieutenant J.G. Alvarez, United States Navy, was the first serviceman to achieve a unique milestone in American history. What was the significance of this date? Here let me give you the answers here.
Okay.
He was the first astronaut to return to combat duty. He was the first naval officer to earn the Combat Infantryman badge. That'd be hard to do.
Yeah, it would.
He was the first Native American to score an aerial victory. He set a new record for a time spent as a POW.
Well, I think Alvarez, I know he is credited for being the first POW ever captured in Vietnam. Everyone thinks that. But I don't think that's true.
No, it's not. Even though the combat quiz here says that he was the first one, the answer they give is Lieutenant J.G. Alvarez was shot down in his A-4 Skyraider on August 5th, 1964, and was finally released 8.5 years later in February of 1963. I'm going to have to contact these people and explain to them they're wrong. Because
I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
The gentleman who has the honor or misfortune, I guess would be a better word than honor, is a man named Floyd James Thompson.
Yes.
He was flying a Bird Dog. He was actually a co-pilot in a Bird Dog type of airplane. He had gone to Vietnam for 6 months TDY, long 6 months, and he was shot down 26th of March, 1964. And reason most of you don't know anything about, most people don't know anything about him, because Lieutenant Alvarez was the name that people used on everything that came out from the government said Lieutenant Alvarez. Part of the reason for that was, even with the bracelets, Thompson's wife, who basically left him while he was a POW, and had all of his money sent to her place where she moved in with a sergeant who had just retired from the military, and she refused to have the word out that he was a missing in action, and also she would not let the bracelets that were very popular with POW's name on it, she would not let the bracelets out. So most people did not know that he was a POW for a long, long time. He came back and found out what his wife had done. They broke up, and he died at 68, a broken man. They treated him really bad. He was the first POW. He had malaria. He broke his back when he crashed. He was wounded from bullets. He was in pretty bad shape, and they treated him really bad. He did sign a letter saying that he was being well taken care of, even though he could hardly write.
Right.
He came back. It was a broken man. Stayed in the military for quite some time, but died basically alone as a broken man at 68. It's a real pity that a man who
It's a real shame. It's a real shame.
Spent that much time and energy, and was a man that was he was 9 years. He was there 6 months before Alvarez got there. But almost everybody, Vietnam vets included, will always tell you that Lieutenant Alvarez was the first, but it was not. It was Thompson. And you can go online and Google Hugh Thompson. Not Hugh Thompson. Hugh Thompson was at My Lai. It was right. Floyd James Thompson, or they called him Jim. And read his story. It was quite an interesting story, and so forth. So.
We know, Bill, the whole POW issue, as we brought it up, of course, on the show with Bill Judy and his wife, and Norman Gaddis, our audience has had the opportunity to delve into this world that was before it was closed. They were locked doors. And once we opened the doors to this venue of knowledge, they've opened wider and wider and wider. Almost all of our schools in Wake County now, all 27 high schools, have the opportunity now to open up the vault of the POW issue. You see the flags everywhere. You see my bumper stickers everywhere. There's always been people saying, "What's Palmia? What's Palmia?" Now they know. Thanks for these guys for sharing their lives with us and being willing to answer questions. And they are really good guys. And they're willing to talk to anyone that asks them. Just ask Bill Judy.
Yes. Well, Bob, we talked a little bit about how things turn at Tet, and I'll give you an idea how misguided and so forth. In 1972, South Vietnam and the United States were winning the Vietnam War decisively in every way. President Nixon ordered the bombings and so forth, but he stopped those. And North Vietnam's capital city and Hao Phong Harbor were the major cities. He bombed those, and where the Vietnamese had left the peace table, they came back and kind of got the real peace going on.
Yes, they did.
And in January 1973, President Nixon gave a speech to the nation on primetime television, announced the Paris Peace Accords had been initialed by the United States, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, the Viet Cong, and the accords would be signed on the 27th. And then they were having signs up everywhere going VV Day, Victory in Vietnam Day. And the United States backed up that victory with a simple pledge with the Paris Peace Accords saying that should the South require any military hardware to defend itself against any North Vietnamese aggression, we would provide replacement aid to the South on a piece-by-piece, one-to-one replacement, meaning a bullet for a bullet, a helicopter for a helicopter, all things lost. Also along those lines, we also agreed that North Vietnam could leave combat soldiers in South Vietnam. Now, how do you have a peace accord and allow the enemy to still be in your side of the peace line? I'm not certain. And then it all came apart. In August of that year, in 1974, President Nixon resigned his office on a little thing called Watergate that you so ingrained to get on our content of the scholarships. 3 months after his resignation, they came to Congress, and the Democrats won a landslide victory for the new Congress. And Ford begged Congress to supply the South Vietnamese military with what they need, and actually the Congress got up and walked out of the room. And the Case Church Amendment said that we were not allowed to give Vietnam as much as a Band-Aid to help them out. So We pulled out and left them to fight with the understanding we were going to leave the bad guys in their country, with the understanding we were going to give them the supplies they needed, and we reneged and walked off and left them. At the same time, the Russians and the Chinese were pouring tanks, soldiers, and equipment into North Vietnam, who were marching down from South Vietnam. So South Vietnamese soldiers who fought long and hard, we ended up fighting the North Vietnamese, the Russians, and the Chinese to the end with they were taking like 12 helicopters and getting enough parts to put one helicopter together.
You know, Bill, what irritates me, excuse me, to this end, is what you said about bullet for bullet. We gave our word. As much as Richard Nixon is criticized about his presidency, stop and check your facts. Richard Nixon kept his word to the Vietnamese. Every time we take a class to the wall, every time we talk about the wall, the small wall or the big wall, we almost have to apologize to 58,375 names because we walked away. We broke a promise that they made. And it didn't make any sense. And it doesn't to this day.
Well, I think there's another group we need to have apology for. There's a lot of men who got out of the Vietnam War, but got out of the military with a less than honorable discharge.
Yes, they did.
There's a lot of men who got out of the military with an honorable or less than honorable discharge, who got in trouble and went and got put in jail. And a lot of those guys suffered from something that nobody claimed at the time. It was called post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
Today it's gotten more and more attention. But there is a movement right now to the 80,000 veterans who got post-traumatic stress and got out less than honorable discharges. They're going back and look at their records to see that they can somehow qualify with the reason they got in trouble was possibly being post-traumatic stress. One of the reasons is because if they got out less than honorable discharge, they can't get any VA benefits. They can't buy a house on the VA loan. They can't get VA schooling and so forth. And a lot of guys came back with post-traumatic stress. Now almost everybody coming back is considered to have it. But in Vietnam War, there wasn't such a thing until many, many years later. And there's a lot of guys that serving in jail time that their problem was post-traumatic stress, and that's what got them in trouble. And I think we owe those guys also some help, maybe not get out of jail or whatever, but some kind of help, because a lot of them are in jail because of the problem of post-traumatic stress.
Well, many of the men that came home from Vietnam and went on to have a productive life and were welcomed home nicely, as most veterans are, went on with their life, but these guys didn't have a chance.
No.
They had no GI Bill. They had no VA benefits. They were just out there. They were a veteran, maybe. Not really a veteran either.
Yeah, we were treated bad when we came home. Can you imagine the guy who came home with less than honorable discharge was treated? And I got a couple of dates I want to throw out for people to know.
Sure.
We've got some NCVI is North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated. We're kind of a busy group. Today is September 24th, that I mentioned a while ago. Monday, September 29th, Bob Matthews hits a whole new plateau. He'll be 70 years old or 70 years young, so I wish him a happy birthday. Call in. But I'll give you an idea of some of the things we've got going. As you know, probably, if you don't, I'm going to tell you anyway, on first Saturday of every month for the last 27, almost 28 years now, we have met at the Capitol grounds here in Raleigh, North Carolina, to call out the names of those who are still missing from Southeast Asia. In 1973, the communists freed all the POWs in Vietnam. But they never mentioned the prisoners who were in Laos and Cambodia, which is where a lot of the special operations groups, special forces groups were. They mostly let go of the pilots and so forth they had at Hanoi Hilton. But either way, there's 41 from North Carolina who are still unaccounted for. We meet the first Saturday at 12 o'clock noon to call out those names. This October 4th, we will be having that same meeting, same ceremony as usual, and the Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association will be calling out the names. But we'll be in two places that day. On October 4th, North Carolina Vietnam Veterans has a 1/8 replica of the Vietnam Wall. It's in D.C. I will be taking that wall down to Siler City for a special event down there. If you'd like more information about it, I'll give you my personal telephone number later, and then you can call and I'll give you the location as soon as I figure out where it's at. All I know is I'm going to Siler City. October 17th is a homeless veteran stand down here in Raleigh on Wilmington Street at the Veterans Home out there. October 22nd, we'll be doing our normal show in October. November 1st, we have our POWMI ceremony downtown Raleigh, as usual. But I will be, and Bob will probably be with me. We're taking the small wall down to the Cotton Festival in Dunn, North Carolina. So if you're down in the Dunn area or you know anybody in the Dunn, North Carolina area, we'll be easy to find because we'll be on the streets of Dunn with the wall and the POW panels and so forth. November 8th, Battle of the Hump Day. Be sure and listen to Big and Rich's song, the 8th of November. It's a great song. The Veterans Parade, the North Carolina Veterans Parade is here in Raleigh. November 9th, I will have the NCVI Small Wall in Oxford at a Baptist church there at 3 o'clock. It's a Veterans Appreciation Day. On November 12th, we'll be starting our Agent Orange show with sponsored by the VVA, 5:30 out of Durham. On November 20th, where Bob and I and a couple of other guys are taking a trip to Boston, where we'll be speaking, or Bob will be speaking to the National Social Studies Conference. We go along as bodyguards and to also hand out information and so forth. Become the Vanna White of the show. And we'll be going to Boston to present to the Social Studies Convention there. If you're a Social Studies teacher, we'll see you in Boston. If you won't plan on going, the fact that we're going to be there is the reason you should go ahead and go anyway. November 26th will be the follow-up show on the Agent Orange hometown meeting. If you're in the Raleigh area, we'd like to invite you on December 14th to our candlelight service at 6 o'clock. It'll be at the State Capitol in front of the Vietnam Memorial. And then in January 3rd is our POW ceremony. We're going back to January 5th. Along with a partnership with the North Carolina History Museum, we will be doing a symposium. And our guest on the symposium, the first symposium will be basically the beginning of the war. We will have Joe Galloway, who wrote the book. Co-wrote the book with Hal Moore, Colonel Hal Moore. We Were Soldiers Once and Young. He was the reporter that flew in by helicopter, one of the last helicopters in for the Battle of Drang Valley. He is going to be one of our guest panelists. We're talking with a local Vietnam vet, TV star to be our commentator. I'm talking with a man who was awarded the Medal of Honor from that battle. The strange thing about it, he got left out of the movie, but he was wounded the first day because he attacked 4 machine gun nests and wiped those out and was wounded in the process. He will be one of our guests, and we're looking for another guest. If you know somebody that was in that battle, again, give me a call, and we'd like to have him come in and sit on the panel. Also, on February 2nd, we'll be doing another symposium there at the museum. That one will be on POWs. We will plan on having Norman Gaddis, who's been on that show before, General Norman Gaddis, and Bill Judy. In between speaking engagements now, he's speaking with Bonnie's group pretty soon. He's got his own group. He's got his own groupies, and also we plan on having some former South Vietnamese soldiers who also were POWs for quite a few years in re-education camps and so forth. And then in March 27th, 28th, and 29th, we're having a big thing with the National Museum, or the North Carolina Museum of History, at their auditorium and so forth. It's called Etchings in Stone. It will be the drama that one of our members has written. It was performed in Texas to rave reviews. We'll be getting you more information and tell you how to get tickets and so forth. So we got 3 big events coming out with the North Carolina History Museum. We're excited to be partnering with them, and they're excited to be partnering with us. So it's
a whole new layer of information.
Yes, and lots of information will be given out, and you can come have a good time, see some of the exhibits in the museum and so forth.
I would be a little remiss if I didn't also mention that September 29th, this Monday, as Bill mentioned, is my birthday. Also is Mr. Dixon's birthday.
We're twins, can't you tell?
As he turned 70. I also would be a little remiss if I didn't mention I was out of town for about a week, and my wife Betty and my grandson Cooper and I had the opportunity to stop at a place in Pennsylvania called Shanksville, where the plane went down on the way to the Washington, D.C., and we had the opportunity to walk among the Valley of Heroes, where the 40 names are posted where the plane went down. You know what I'm talking about. The infamous day in history. And all of us only wish, and I think I know we would have done the same thing under the same circumstances. The monument is not quite finished, but believe me, it's worth your time. If you're in the Gettysburg area, in the hills of southeastern Pennsylvania, stop by Shanksville. You'll be glad you did. We certainly were.
That had to be quite an experience to go there.
It was.
I got one more question for you.
Okay.
Who is the first name on the wall?
You had to stump me tonight, didn't you?
His name was Army Major Dale Buis, B-U-I-S, and his name is bigger than the other names on the wall. And he was killed in July 8th, 1959.
Wow.
And he's on panel 1E, the beginning in 1959. And I just had, you did so good on the test a while ago. You did a whole lot better than I did. I had already given you a couple of answers. I won't count those. But I just wanted to give you that one last. It's always wondered why 1959. Well, he was killed in 1959. On the last day of his life, in the moments before our nation's history changed forever.
And we do hope.
There was actually a movie about him. I did not realize that. Jeff Chandler was in it. It's called The Tattered Dress. I'm going to have to get that and see what it is. It's
And we will one day hopefully have Colonel Hindvo on our show.
Yes, one way or another, I'm going to get him if I have to put him in re-education camp in my car and bring him. His health is not the best in the world, and his wife is also in bad health, but he couldn't drive tonight in the rain and so forth. And the situation with Colonel Hahn, his friend who's won't be with us much longer. I went to his house. He was laying there and not moving, and he actually heard my voice and stood up. He can't talk. He has not eaten in a week, but he actually stood up and shook my hand.
Well, your voice is on that to a lot of people.
That's, or made him leave, but he couldn't leave. But his family was just so appreciative that American soldier was there to see him at the last. I saw him about a year ago. And he had tried to give him chemo, and he would not have that. He was going to go to Vietnam and try their treatment over there. He went to Vietnam and it didn't work, so he's back. And his family are really standing behind him. He's got about 40-some children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren here that really love him and really looking after him and so forth. He's very fortunate, and he was a Vietnam vet, just like the rest of us. He's a brother in arms, and
they've helped us quite a bit.
I hope his family the best and the strength to carry on and do what God. Again, thank you for tuning in with us tonight, or if you watch this later, it's an archive. I hope you got some good information out of the show. We didn't have the show we promised you, but we tried to throw out as good information as we could get. And
yes, we did.
Again, we will see you. Let's see. We will see you. We'll be a lot older back when we see them again. But we will see you in October, and we'll have our October shows, getting ready for our November show, Agent Orange.
Yes.
And you need to make sure that you tell everybody about it. Thank you, and good night, Mr. Producer.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for tuning in.
to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.